Welcome to the Prime Podcast. This is our 11th episode. I'm here to talk about the week in consumer electronics and technology news. A lot has happened since we're kind of getting in the fall season. And if you don't already know, the fall season is when all these companies, the big tech companies, try to get their products out there before the holidays, which is when the most people will be buying things. So that includes, we have a new iPhone, a new iPod Touch, a potential Steam box gaming device, and a whole lot more, including some new Kindle Fires, a new lineup of Nokia phones, including the Lumia 820, 920, and I'll briefly kind of cover what will happen kind of next week with the Wii U, and so a couple new NVIDIA graphics cards, which we'll talk about next week, and I'll be wrapping up the week with that on the blog, theprime.co. So let's go and get started with what I wrote about on Monday, September 10th. And that was AT&T and Sprint expanding their 4G LTE networks ahead of the iPhone 5 event, because that happened this Wednesday, or yesterday. So on September 12th, Apple will be holding an event, and on that date they announced the iPhone 5. And obviously the iPhone 5 hasn't been secret. Apple has been quiet about it, but there have been many rumors about the iPhone 5, including the potential support for 4G LTE, and this article kind of just argued that the iPhone 5 will have 4G LTE, just makes sense. And to start that out, I kind of talked about Verizon's 4G LTE network and how they're the first to introduce 4G LTE back in December 2010. And now 2 years later, we're looking at a huge network covering 371 cities that makes out a total of 75% of the United States population. So that's a pretty big network right there, and I personally have Verizon 4G LTE in my city right now. I've had it for a while now, I think over a year now, but yeah, Verizon 4G LTE, it's pretty much in every major city in every state, other than Alaska. I don't think Alaska has any LTE coverage yet. AT&T, on the other hand, jumped onto the LTE bandwagon a little bit late. They actually started their network earlier this year. And in total, AT&T has 4G LTE coverage in a total of 53 cities throughout the United States, covering 74 million Americans, which is just under 25% of the United States population. Even though AT&T's network is pretty small, when compared to Verizon's, AT&T plans to expand their network significantly before the end of this year. More specifically, AT&T is planning to expand their 4G LTE network to 47 additional cities by the end of this year, bringing the total to 107 cities. So that is still small compared to Verizon, but those cities that are going to add their network to are bigger cities, so in the end they're going to get a similar network to Verizon by the end of this year, even though it's not covering a lot of the smaller cities. Personally, my city is not on the list of those total 100 cities, but I do have a city in my state that does have Verizon 4G or AT&T 4G LTE coverage, so it's bound to come to my city next year, most likely. And the same also applies to Sprint. Sprint has been the latest to the 4G LTE game. They joined actually in June of this year, which is only a few months ago. And because of the late start, Sprint only has a few cities with coverage at only 19. And the coverage is also very tightly isolated, just a few states, since it's just not everywhere like AT&T, and they have coverage in many states. Well, Sprint only has coverage in a few states and cities in those states that are very close together. It's kind of interesting. I guess Sprint is trying to roll it out from certain places, just expand it from there. But the good news is that Sprint plans to expand their network significantly over the coming months by adding over 100 new cities for 4G LTE coverage, making a big step towards their completed network, which they plan to launch in 2013. So that's what they're planning to do. Sprint LTE coverage is not in my area yet, and I don't even think it's going to be in my state by the end of this year. So it's going to be in Nebraska, most likely in 2013 when they finish their network. But at this point in time, Sprint, AT&T, and Verizon, every single new phone that comes on the network pretty much it pretty much has to have 4G LTE support. Otherwise, the carriers will most likely reject the phone. The iPhone 5, it could have launched with 3G, and the carriers probably just accepted it because it's something that really they need to have on their network. But And we know that the iPhone 5 has 4G LTE now, but basically I was saying that since these carriers, Sprint and AT&T, both during the same week announced plans to expand their network, 4G LTE network significantly, I really think that that was the reason why that just pointed out that Apple was going to have an iPhone 5 with 4G LTE, and they did. So let's go ahead and move on to our first sponsor, which is Media Temple. I use them for web hosting, not right now. I'm hosting the website from home, theprimer.co. But in the past, I've used them significantly. I'm still using them for domain names. They have good domain names at $12 a year, pretty cheap. And that includes .co, .com, .net, .org, all those extensions. They also have good web hosting. You can get a grid service shared hosting for $20 a month, dedicated virtual and VE servers. Those are basically VPSs, and then a DVP or a VEP or something like that. But those are basically dedicated machines they can get from Media Temple, and they have pretty good web hosting. They're really, really stable, and they're really, really fast. Their servers are both fast, and they're also their network's fast, low latency, and I really like Media Temple for web hosting company and domain name registrar as well, because they have good pricing. It's very static. You know, GoDaddy, you know, they have .com for like $10 or .nets for like $12 or .org for like $20. They just don't really have a good organized way of pricing their domain names. Media Temple has a really good flat $12 fee for any domain name, and they also have good sales all the time. From the summer, they sold domain names for $40 a year, which is a pretty good deal, and it's bound to happen again in the near future. So please check out Media Temple. I have a link in the description below to their website. Moving on to some gaming news, and that relates to Valve and something called Steam Big Picture Beta, which is very interesting. So overall, the majority of gamers tend to primarily use some sort of console like the PlayStation 3 or Xbox 360 for day-to-day gaming. Most people think of PC gaming as too complicated or too expensive or just not as good as console gaming. At one time, PC gaming was complicated and expensive, but Valve has slowly started to make PC gaming a much better experience with their digital video game distribution platform called Steam. Right now, Steam is really just a place to get video games, but over the next few years, Valve might be seeing much more than that. Recently, a job listing on Valve's website has pointed to, in a way, that Valve is trying to get into the computer hardware business. This could mean many things, like, for example, Valve could launch a line of gaming accessories that have like some sort of new innovative gaming keyboard or mouse, or Valve could be making their own computer, which is what I think they're going to do. They could do both, but I think they're making computers really the way to do it. And that computer, they could sell it for a lower cost and kind of call it the Steam Box, or kind of like a console. And there have been rumors in the past that Valve was planning to do that. Valve also is planning to actually get into the computer software business because they recently announced plans to launch a Steam App Store. Initially, it was due to arrive on September 5th, but it has since been delayed to an unknown date. So even though it's been delayed, I really like the idea of being able to buy applications, download them immediately, and then sync information like app settings across multiple computers, whether they're Macs or PCs. It'll just work. And I think Valve's a really good company to do it. They already have Steam. They know how to sell games online and everything synced together and work well. They could do the same thing for computer applications. Valve also launched something kind of new, and I guess something that we didn't really expect. And that's called Steam Big Picture Beta. So if you open up Steam and check the box to download beta updates, restart Steam, and you'll all of a sudden have a little thing in the corner of your screen called Big Picture. And Big Picture is basically a way for you to use Steam on an HDTV very easily using a controller instead of a mouse and keyboard. You can still use a mouse and keyboard, but it's really optimized for a controller. And that also adds to the rumors that Steam is going to make a console, or at least work with companies to make consoles, because this new user interface looks a lot like Xbox Live, but with a lot of modifications. But it does everything that Steam does, but with a much better user interface, really optimized for a controller. I think that's potentially what Valve is going to use for their Steam Box gaming console. And yeah, it's a beta right now, so there are a lot of bugs. I actually used it for a couple of days. but I had a bug where essentially all the games I had installed on my computer showed up as not installed, and if you can't really play games, I have Steam, so I ended up having to go back to the normal version of Steam. But big picture, beta should eventually turn into a final piece of software that Valve can give to everyone who uses Steam, and kind of look forward to that. Moving on to the big story this week, and that is the Apple iPhone 5 event. Apple held their long-awaited iPhone 5 event today. At that event, Apple unveiled a larger, slimmer, and faster iPhone 5 that supports 4G LTE, along with the next generation iPod Touch and iPod Shuffle. They also had lots of new things to announce, like a new version of iTunes, a new type of headphones, and that's all that Apple announced. Tim Cook started out their event like they usually do, after giving a little bit of information on statistics about Apple. A few of those key statistics are Apple so far sold 7 million copies of Mountain Lion. They have, with 27% market share, Apple is the leading laptop manufacturer in the United States. Apple's iOS App Store has 250,000 iPad apps and 700,000 total apps. 90% of those 700,000 applications are downloaded every month, and the average Apple user has 100 different apps on their device. So let's go and get started by talking about the really key thing that Apple announced at this event. That's the iPhone 5. We've been waiting a long time for this. There have been many rumors, and pretty much all those rumors have been correct, including the larger 4-inch display, the new docking connector, and all of that. One of those features is the larger 4-inch Retina display, which is at 1136 by 640 resolution. And even with that larger screen, Apple's managed to make their thinnest and lightest phone ever. It weighs only 112 grams and is only 7.6 millimeters thick, which is pretty impressive. And according to Apple, the iPhone 5 was actually designed from the ground up so that it could be this thin and this light. And to kind of add to that, they have a new docking connector, which is an 8-pin connector that looks a lot like micro USB that's found on many Android phones. But one of the neat features with it is reversible, so there's no there's basically no wrong way to plug it into the phone, so that's kind of nice. And it's called the Lightning Dock connector. Personally, I don't know if it supports Thunderbolt or USB 3.0. Apple didn't really specify that. I kind of hope that it could potentially in the future support Thunderbolt or USB 3.0. But the Lightning Dock connector kind of hints that's faster. But if you have an older iOS device or iOS accessory, you can buy a $29 adapter that'll allow you to use your old accessories with your new iPhone. Although I have read that the adapter doesn't work with sound. So essentially, if you have a Blue, they make those microphones that go in the iPhone, or you have a dock that goes to speakers. Those won't work with this new iPhone, which is kind of disappointing. Along with that new design is a slightly different look. It seems to be more made out of more brushed and matte aluminum when compared to the glass look that the iPhone 4S had. I like the new look. It looks very smooth and sleek. And it will most likely be a lot stronger. You can drop it on the back without having a shatter, which will be very nice. That larger 4-inch display will give you an added row of icons on your home screen. And all of Apple's applications have been updated to support the new resolution, but developers will have to manually update their applications. But while you wait to get the updates, there'll be a letterbox on either side of the screen, or black boxes. So that's kind of disappointing. But I guess in a year or so, all the applications will be updated and it'll work just fine. Apple's also updated a few other things, like the Apple A6 processor, which is twice as fast when it comes to CPU power and twice as fast when it comes to GPU power. It is most likely a dual-core processor with quad-core graphics, although it could be quad-core both ways. We don't know. The new processor supports things like 4G LTE, as well as a new panorama mode, which allows you to use the camera to make panorama pictures. 4G LTE is another thing that's been added, and it's kind of nice. You can connect to Verizon, AT&T, or Sprint's 4G LTE network to get faster data speeds, and it also supports HD voice and face symbol 4G LTE. Although one interesting thing to note is that the HD voice, I don't think it works on any carrier in the United States, including Sprint. So it's kind of interesting right there. So if you want to get this new iPhone, pre-orders will begin on September 14th, which is the day before, the day before I publish this, and it'll ship a week later on September 21st. It'll be available in 16, 32, or 64 gigabyte versions for $200, $300, and $400 respectively. In addition to that, you can get a 3G. You can't get a 3GS anymore; they've been discontinued. But now you can get an iPhone 4S for $100 or an iPhone 4 for free, which is a pretty good deal. Apple has also updated the new iPod Touch, making it. I really think this is a really good new. I think it's a good update because Apple hasn't updated the iPod Touch in quite a while now. And essentially, this new iPod Touch is the iPhone 5's form factor with iPhone 4S's hardware. And first off, it's been completely redesigned in a way that looks pretty good actually. Instead of going with a very shiny back, Apple went with a matte aluminum look. Similar to the iPhone 5, it will be available in many colors, including pink, yellow, blue, white, silver, black, and slate. And just like the iPhone 5, will have a larger 4-inch Retina display. When it comes to internal hardware, we're looking at the Apple A5 processor, 5-megapixel camera, and 32 or 64 gigs of storage. So not too impressive internals, but if you look at how thin and light this thing is, it's only 6.1 millimeters thick and only 88 grams of weight. This thing is actually a pretty small device, actually. It'll begin selling in October, or start shipping then. Pre-order will begin on September 14th. It costs $300 and $400 for 32 gigabyte and 64 gigabyte versions, respectively. And the last generation iPod Touch will sell for $200 and $250 for 16 or 32 gigabyte versions. And also, because this thing is going to cost $300, it really makes me think that Apple would never sell an iPad mini, at least right now, for, $300 or $200 compete with the Nexus 7. I don't think that's really possible right now, which is kind of interesting right there. And to wrap this up, Apple launched a new iPod Nano. Kind of boring news, I guess, for most of us. But if you want a very small, cheap, portable MP3 player, there's the iPod Nano. It's been redesigned. It's now a 2.5-inch device. It runs operating system that's kind of like iOS, but it isn't iOS. There's no apps or anything like that. But it has icons, it's a touchscreen, home button, playback buttons on the sides of the device. It has an FM tuner, Bluetooth, fitness features, and a pedometer. And I kind of like the idea of this. It's cheap, $150. You can play songs. It works. But if you have a phone already, the iPhone or iPod Touch, there's no real need to get this iPod Nano. But I guess there are markets for it that still exist. So that's Apple's event right there. Pretty big amount of announcements. So let's go ahead and move on to Amazon's event, which actually happened last Thursday. But there's also a pretty big event. Amazon started out with the new Kindle Paperwhite. It is essentially a Kindle with a new screen technology that's like essentially improved e-ink. That's much sharper and higher contrast, and it's also backlit, so it'll work in the night or in the day, and it'll look the same. It'll be white, essentially. That's why it's called Paperwhite. It'll have the same battery life that you find with other e-readers, about 8 weeks on a single charge. It'll be 9.1 millimeters thick, weigh 7.5 ounces, and according to Amazon, it's thinner than a magazine and lighter than a paperback. It'll start shipping on October 1st for $119. For the Wi-Fi model, with the 3G model, it costs $180. So, pretty good there. If you don't mind e-ink, you can get the original Kindle or last year's model for $70, which is a pretty good deal. If you want something a little bit more high-end, more like a tablet, then you might be interested in the Kindle Fire. Amazon updated the Kindle Fire, the original model, and in the process, they managed to make it a little bit faster, add more RAM, improve the battery life, and cut the price down to just $160. It'll be shipping on September 14th. For $200, not much more than $160, you can get the Kindle Fire HD7, which is more comparable to the Nexus 7 from Google. It has a high-resolution display at 1280 by 800. It has a faster 1.2 GHz dual-core processor. It has more RAM at 1 GB, and it has more storage at 16 or 32 GB. It has improved battery life as well as a front-facing camera. It'll sell for $200, as I mentioned previously, and it'll begin shipping on September 14th. Moving up to the 8.9-inch screen size, Amazon has the Kindle Fire HD 8.9, which isn't the rumored 10-inch Kindle Fire, but it is a bigger Kindle Fire. And it's really actually an interesting device. It has an 8.9-inch IPS display at a 1920 by 1200 resolution, along with 1.5 GHz dual-core processor, 1 GB of RAM, and 16 or 32 gigs of storage with an HDMI port. Amazon only asked for $200 for this tablet, which is a pretty good deal. Only $100 more than the Nexus 7, and a good middle device between the Apple iPad and these Nexus 7 other 7-inch devices. There will also be a 4G LTE version, which will work on AT&T's network. It'll sell for $500, and it will be completely unlocked, and you'll pay $50 per year, and with that price, you'll get 250 megabytes of data each month. And now, before you say that 250 megabytes is nothing, actually just think about it. If you're like me, you just use Wi-Fi at home or wherever you are. You're usually using Wi-Fi. You only really use mobile data when you're away from home or in a place that doesn't have Wi-Fi. And for 250 megabytes, it's probably just fine. You're downloading emails or just browsing web lightly or just downloading books. Maybe once a day. That's not going to use much data. 250 megabytes might be just fine. So I think that's a really good deal there. So really, Amazon has some good new tablets. The Kindle Fire, the Kindle Fire HD 7, and the Kindle Fire HD 8.9, as well as the Kindle Paperwhite if you're interested in that, which is an e-reader. Well, these are all tablets. Our second sponsor is Amazon, because they're now selling the new Kindle Fire HD. If you want, you can get the Kindle Fire for a little bit less, or the Kindle Fire 8.9 for a little bit more. But I honestly think most people are going to be interested in this Kindle Fire HD. It's kind of a nice middle ground between the larger screen and the lower end Kindle Fire. It'll be selling for $199. You can go ahead and order it from Amazon with the link in the description below. So that's our second sponsor, and you get the new Kindle Fire HD for only $200, which is a pretty good deal. Note that it also has 16 gigs of storage, which is more than Nexus 7. It's also more tightly integrated with Amazon's ecosystem, which for some might be a really good thing to have, because Android can be a little bit complicated and hard to use for people who just don't really know about Android yet. Moving on to our final article, and that is Nokia and their Lumia 820 and 920 Windows phones. Last Friday, Nokia held an event where they talked about Windows Phone 8, which will have a few new features like pinch to zoom when using the camera, as well as panorama mode and video and image effects. Those are a few features. You can also take screenshots with the new version of Windows Phone. There are many more features that most likely Microsoft will announce in the near future. So Nokia's new flagship phone is the Nokia Lumia 920, and it will have a speedy 1.5 GHz dual-core processor, 1 GB of RAM, and a larger 4.5-inch display at 1280 by 768 resolution. It is overall a pretty interesting device. It's made out of one piece of polycarbonate, which means the battery inside is stuck in there, which is a 2,000 mAh battery, which is probably going to be fine for most people. With that, you'll get support for things like wireless charging and NFC, which is kind of nice. And another piece of technology is a thing that allows you to use your phone even with your fingernails or when you have gloves on, which is kind of nice. You know, if you're in the winter and you have gloves on and you don't want to take them off and you want to use your phone, you can use them now with this Lumia 920. And it's kind of nice there. It also has a new camera that they call the Peer View camera. It's an 8.7 megapixel sensor that supports optical image stabilization, which is the first for any smartphone, which will also make it support low light situations very well. And from what I've seen, it takes pretty good videos and images even when you're doing it in the dark, which is really nice. It's due to arrive in select markets from the fourth quarter of 2012, and most likely arrive on AT&T on November 2nd. That's the rumor right now. It is going to arrive in the United States, though, and possibly at more than one carrier. Moving to the mid-range of Nokia's lineup, there is the Lumia 820, which is similar to the 920 with the same 1 GHz dual-core processor, 1 GB of RAM, but with a smaller 4.3-inch WVGA display, less storage at only 8 gigabytes, and less high-quality 8-megapixel rear-facing camera. But it does support a lot of the same features as the 920, like the super sensitive touch display, which is essentially that technology that allows you to use the touchscreen with fingernails or through gloves. And you can also swap out different colored backings that can enable things like NFC and wireless charging. And since the battery cover is removable, you can swap out batteries, which is kind of useful for many people. It's due to arrive in the fourth quarter of this year in select markets, and it will support 4G LTE. And I'm mostly betting it'll arrive on T-Mobile or AT&T here in the United States. And it could arrive on Verizon or Sprint, like the 920 as well. If you think about it, I think it's possible that we could be getting these Nokia phones on all 4 of the carriers in the United States. So that's about it for this podcast. Next week we'll be talking about Nintendo and the Wii U, which will be arriving in the United States on November 18th for $300. We'll also be talking about the new graphics cards from NVIDIA, like the GeForce GTX 650 and the GeForce GTX 660 graphics cards, and much more. So you can stay tuned on theprime.co to get those articles right now, or you can stay tuned on this YouTube channel, theprime.co, and subscribe, and you'll get updates next week when we publish the next video next week. And we will also be publishing another video each Sunday, and that's basically where we play video games. We're doing Minecraft right now, so you can check that out. But that's about it. Stay tuned for the next episode next week.